Well, all right. So this is the Brown Duke Gun Show. My name is JP Garcia. Here today with Brandon Elias. We are missing Austin again, but that's okay. We can make it. And before I get into it, this is the official podcast for Sentry Defense Indoor Range in Youngsville, Louisiana. You're looking for a place to come shoot, come do it. Now's the time to buy stuff. Now's the time to learn how to shoot. So, and if you're not local to us, then go out somewhere, find a good range, learn how to shoot, learn how to do all this stuff. This is also, we never say this. This is the first time I'm going to say it. This is the official podcast for Sentry Manufacturing, of course. Yeah. I just got my Deadlock today, or not today, yesterday. It's brown. They have two colors, black and FDE. And so this was the closest to brown for the Brown Duke Gun Show. This is going in my rifle probably as soon as we finish recording. So thank you guys. It looks awesome. Package looks great. And make sure you get yours online at sentrymanufacturing.com. Or I think you can also come into the range, right?
Yep. Yeah, you can come into the range or in store.
Okay. Very good. This is also, we've never said this before either, this is the official podcast for Skill Builder Ammo and Sentry Prime. And that's a good segue into what we're going to talk about today. We want to talk about the anatomy of ammunition. This is something I think that a lot of people just make assumptions about how ammo is made and what the terms mean and all of that stuff. For you guys who reload, this is not for you. Yeah. This is going to be way basement level stuff for you guys. But there are a lot of folks who come into the range who, they ask about, okay, what's this grain weight? I thought grain weight meant something else and blah, blah, blah. So wanted to break it down for you guys.
You get overcomplicated a lot of times,
Yeah.
They have a lot of stuff on the box. So if you don't know what you're looking for on the box, then it's kind of hard to pick out ammo. So we can kind of talk about different components and terminology and things like that to where it makes it easier for you to go and pick out ammo or what you need for your gun.
Sure. Absolutely. Well, you have some of our defensive ammo, our Sentry Prime product there. It is put together, and we actually chose that case. It's a different case than brass, right? And so
this one's a 2-part case. It's S3 Solutions or Shell Shock is another name of it. It's a stainless steel case, and then there's an aluminum back on the back of it. So you could actually load more powder in the case because it's thinner than brass, but it's stronger than brass. Right. And it's also lighter than brass. It's like half the weight of brass.
Yeah, that's the nice thing I like about it is that when you load up a mag, it's very light.
It is. Yeah, so when we weighed it on the scale, and out of 6 loaded rounds of regular ammo, you can get 7 loaded rounds of this.
That's amazing.
So you save 1 extra round.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Well, and it has, a lot of folks have asked me about that case. It looks like kind of a budget case and things like that. And I said, no, well, that case is very proven. That 9mm case is very proven in the competition market, right? Because a lot of folks who want to load, and we'll get into how they load it in a minute, but when they want to load above plus P, right? So a lot of folks know about defensive ammo. They know about the plus P moniker and what that means, right? But, the competition people, particularly the ones who shoot open, they want to know about shooting plus P, or they want to load it above plus P. So they use this case and it doesn't blow up in their gun.
Right. Yeah. Because so the technology behind it is the Army's actually using a similar case to this, a 2-part case for the 277 Fury.
Yeah.
Or 6.8 by 50 something, 51, I think it is. So the technology is that the whole entire case is inside the chamber, the part that holds the powder. Yeah. So there's no way you can have a case head separation because all of the case is actually in there, right? So
Correct.
The back part that sticks out the chamber is not part of the case. It's like a 2-piece system.
Right. Now, it does make it a pain in the neck to load.
It sucks to load. Yeah, it really does. It's such a pain to load, but I do believe it's a better case.
Yeah. Very good. Hey, so going back to ammo in the cases, we actually did put some thought into using those cases, right? Because they do end up becoming they're more efficient. It's easier to carry a bunch of rounds, right? It is lighter.
Yeah, it's lighter weight, and then like you said, they're hold up to higher pressures. And on self defense ammo, you usually want to push it to higher pressures and higher speed. So if you're starting to get to that threshold, you don't have to worry about getting a case head separation or having a case blow up on you or anything like that. It doesn't show any pressure signs.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah.
So we usually load 124s out of like a standard 5-inch gun at like 1150 or so, which is moving pretty good.
1150 feet per second.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah, 11 feet per second. So we can kind of talk about some of that terminology that we're talking about. So the whole thing would be a cartridge, right? Like a lot of people just call the whole thing a bullet. And if you come in and say, hey, do you have any 9mm bullets? Like, yeah, I know what you mean, right?
Right.
But whenever we start talking about these things later on, the bullet would be the only part that comes out the muzzle of the gun, the only end piece of it. So whenever we talk about bullets a little bit later, just know that that's what we're talking about. We're not talking about the whole thing.
Right.
You know? The case would be the thing that holds everything together. So in this picture, it'd be silver. And then in the back, you have a primer that's going to be right in the center of the cartridge. So this is center fired ammo. They have center fired and rim fired cartridges. Rim fired, the firing pin will strike on the edge of the rim. And then on center fire, it strikes right in the center. So it's going to be more reliable ammunition. And that's what we recommend for self-defense would be center fired ammo.
Certainly. Yeah. And so I have some stuff here that we can just show. So when you talk here, may I?
Yep.
So we talk about, most people will talk about this cartridge as a bullet. And yes, we all know what that means. You know, this is a complete cartridge. It's put together. It has powder in it. It's ready to go. Right. So if you take it apart, you actually have a projectile that kind of looks like this. This is coated lead. But we also have, I just found 10 bags of this 45, which, we don't load. But this is a bag of 45 caliber projectiles. And, these are bullets, right? These are the bullets that come out of your barrel. So that's the bullet part, right? And then you have the case, which is, again, it's the bottom part of this cartridge. And this one is empty. It has been fired. It looks like it's a 40 cal. So I have completely mismatched parts here. But the point is, this is a brass case that a lot of you guys will be familiar with. And then the primer located on the back, has been fired. So it has a dimple in it, so it did go off. But what happens is when you load, you put the powder inside here, right? And you have a machine to do that generally. There are some folks who hand load and they'll measure out the amount of each case. Yeah, that's nuts to me. But anyway, so they will measure out powder. However you get it in there, you'll put a certain amount specified by the powder manufacturer. They'll tell you how much to put in there, right? And then you would then put the bullet on top using a press of some sort. Then press it down, and then you would kind of crimp around it, and then that would create this package here, right?
Yep.
So that cartridge, yeah. So and
there's different types of components, like your case. You have different types of cases, right? You have brass case, you have nickel coated brass, you have steel case, you have aluminum case. So some people come in and ask like, what's the difference between each one? I'd say like brass case is the most popular, right? It's going to be a gold color whenever you look at it. I'd say that's like the second best case that you can get, right? So in everyday ammo, that's what's usually loaded in brass case. So brass is really good because it swells up and seals off the chamber, and you get more consistent velocities as you start firing multiple rounds, right? It's like having a straw inside of a cup and like you're sucking through it, and all of a sudden you poke a hole through it. If you have any type of bleed off pressure, you're not going to get as much consistent velocities as you would with a brass case.
Right.
I think the best thing would be like nickel plated brass or something like this, those stainless cases, because they act just like brass, where they swell up and seal off the chamber, but they're also like a little bit slipperier. So in self-defense ammo, they typically use that because it glides better in magazines and it helps with extraction out of the gun. Right. The downside to nickel plated brass, and I'm sure you found this out too, they crack easier.
Yes.
So if you reload it multiple times, it will start cracking. But like for self-defense ammo, you're only loading it one time. It's brand new cases. Correct. And you're done with it. You know. But typically what we found is we start loading nickel plated, it will crack over time because it's a little bit harder.
Yeah. Once fired nickel is kind of like you only want to use that for practice ammo or something like that, right? You don't ever want to bring that to a match or something like that. Again, here we go devolving the competition. But the point is, if you have brand new nickel, it's good. It's really, really good. Yeah. And I would stay away from the once fired stuff unless it's just for practice. It may malfunction, that kind of thing.
Yep. Yep. And the reason why they don't have nickel plated brass on everything is because it's more expensive.
Sure.
Right. You have to have another cost of nickel plating it rather than just brass.
Right.
Underneath that would be like aluminum. So aluminum, it does kind of swell up a little bit, but it doesn't seal off the chamber as much. So if you look at a nickel plated or aluminum case,
right.
I keep saying all the different words.
Yeah.
So aluminum case, whenever you pick it up off the ground after it's been fired, you usually see like a black line that goes down the center of it. And that's usually on the bottom of like where the feed ramp's at on the chamber. So it's like bleeding off gas and bleeding off pressure right there. After that is steel case. Steel case is probably like the worst one because steel doesn't swell up the chamber. Right. It doesn't seal off the chamber. And it also is prone to rust. So what they do to combat that is they coat it in some type of polymer or lacquer coating.
Right.
And then that starts getting sticky and gets sticky.
Gets all in your barrel.
Gets in your barrel and the chamber, and it becomes an issue.
Yeah.
So that's probably the cheapest one because steel case is a lot cheaper than regular brass, but it's the least favorite one.
Yeah. And you'll find that, a lot of times when you see a deal on ammo and you're like, oh my gosh, it's only 12 cents a round or something like that. It's like, read a little bit more. It's probably steel. It's probably, it's better than nothing. But if you have a choice of even aluminum, then go ahead and step up.
It's better.
Yeah.
Yep. And there's some cartridges like designed off of steel case, like 7.62 by 39.
Right.
Like that case was designed off of steel cased ammo because Russians used it. And if you look at the case, it's like tapered.
Yeah.
So instead of having it gum up with all that lacquer coating inside there, since it's tapered in there, it kind of seals off the chamber because of the taper.
Right.
Rather than swelling up and sealing it off.
Yeah, for sure. So, okay. So I guess that's like the broad level overview of what
cases,
ammo is. Yeah, the cases. Where do you want to go? You want to go to the back first? You want to go primers? Or
I guess primers. We can talk about primers.
Sure.
Like different types of primers. What have you experienced with like match primers and regular primers? Have you noticed the difference?
For me, I haven't really. If it's pistol, then they generally go off. I mean, now it's well known that there are certain brands of primer that are harder than others. So, what this means for somebody who's like the regular shooter is absolutely nothing. Like if you've never tinkered with your gun or changed around the springs or done anything like that, this is completely meaningless to you because any regular setup will set off any sort of pistol primer, right?
Yeah, I agree. Like they have like coated primers, like nickel coated, and then regular brass or plated, whatever it is.
Yeah.
But we found that everything kind of goes off.
It goes bang, right? Yeah.
That's all it's going to be there for.
And when it stops going bang is when people have started to play around with, I'm trying to get a lower trigger weight. And I'm changing springs and I'm doing something with the firing pin or doing something weird where you're messing with the stock level of force that the firing pin hits the primer with. And once you start doing that, you start monkeying with your gun, then you start to see where, yes, there are some primers that are harder than others, right? Yep. And so you'll find out that, maybe now that I've done this Glock trigger kit, and spring lightning and stuff, so my Glock trigger starts to feel a little bit better. It's like, it's not able to touch off all the ammo that I'm used to be able to shoot, right?
Yeah.
So then you start to care about brand because you're trying to figure out, okay, what can I actually shoot out of this gun?
Yeah.
So
and that wouldn't be something you would do for self-defense, right?
No, this is a totally competition thing. If you're self-defense, this is kind of a tangent, but I think self-defense, you want to leave your gun stock as possible.
Right.
Yeah, because
I agree.
You don't, there are lots of engineers who design that gun to work with that configuration, and it may suck, but it will work.
It'll work 100%.
Yeah.
Now, there's a difference between like rifle primers and pistol primers. Like
that's for sure.
Rifle primers a lot harder because typically like on NATO primers or like an AR-15, it has a free float firing pin, right?
Yeah.
So whenever you send the bolt home, the firing pin will actually touch the primer. Like it will indent it slightly. So if you put like a pistol primer in there, it'll probably set it off. Yeah. So like if you just send the bolt home, it'll go off. So they make them a lot harder to where you actually have to press trigger in order for it to go off.
Yeah. And for reference, the small pistol primers and the small rifle primers are the same size.
Yeah.
Yeah. They'll fit in the exact same hole. So for example, we've got 9mm here, or is this is 40. You can't see it on camera, but essentially the size of this primer and the size of our rifle primer are exactly the same.
Yep.
So the only difference really is, there's a lot of difference, but one of the differences is the I guess
The diameter of it.
yeah, well, it's not just the diameter, but the toughness of the case.
Yep.
Right. So that's what makes it harder. They put a different type of casing on the primer so that it's harder to kind of puncture.
Right.
You know, and then also on the inside, the explosive is different that they use. But you know, so rifle primers, as you would expect, are a little bit more hot. Right. They'll generate more energy when the firing pin hits the primer.
Because you usually have the more powder to light.
Absolutely. Yeah. You got to light all that powder at the same time. So maybe this is a good tangent to talk about powder in a sense that, you know, in rifles, you've got this huge case and generally you fill up the bullet or the casing to the top with powder, right? That powder is measured in grains. And not individual specific grains, right? It's like grams. Grams to grains is a measurement. So actually, let me look it up. Conversion from grams to grains. Okay, so 1 gram equals 15.4 grains. Okay, and so powder is measured in grains. So the grain weight of the powder is so for comparison. A 223 round may have
40 grains.
40 grains of powder versus a 9mm round. What do we load? 4 grains?
Yeah, 4 grains.
So 10 times the amount of powder. Yeah. So, you know, to come back to primers, to be able to light all of that powder, you have to have more of an explosive within the primer to be able to light it off and not waste all that powder.
Right. And there's different types of powders. Like there's pistol powders, there's rifle powders, and it uses if you get in more into detail with it, it's faster burning powders and slower burning powders.
Correct.
So you would think that rifle powders would be faster burning, but it's actually the opposite. So rifle powders are slower burning, build up more energy, and then pistol powders are faster burning and they set it off a lot quicker.
Correct.
You know.
Yeah.
So, and shotgun powders are the same. They're very similar to pistol powders, very fast burning.
Right. Yeah. And I think part of it too, right? The slower it's activated, the more gas it makes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the more pressure it builds up.
Correct.
Because of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of opposite.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I think, is there anything else you want to say? Oh, there's one other thing to mention about primers. There are 2 sizes of primers. So, there's a small primer and then there's a large primer. And you look at a small small pistol primer and a large pistol primer. The difference is generally going to be, you're going to move up to a large pistol primer in the 45 cal and kind of above.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep. 44 mag. And
44 mag,
like
50 cal.
Yeah. Stuff like that.
I think there are some 40 cals that are large pistol. So I think that's kind of the changeover where you could either have large or small pistol.
Yeah, I know there's 45 that have small pistol. Remember they were trying to do that for a couple of years?
That's right. Yeah.
Because I remember Mike Adams was telling me, like,
he was getting pissed.
Whenever you go and reload them.
Yeah, because you have to sort them out. You won't be able to fit the primer. So the difference clearly, I mean, you know, is that the width of the primer is larger in the large pistol. So trying to jam that into a small pistol, it doesn't work.
Yep.
Yeah. And in fact, it'll probably pop and scare the heck out of you.
Probably set it off.
Yeah. Are there small, are there large rifle primers? I think so, right?
Yeah. So like 308 is a large rifle primer.
Yeah, 308 and above. Yeah.
Yeah. 223, 300 blackout, like all those like intermediate cartridges are usually small rifle. And then whenever you go to like a battle cartridge, like 308 or 7 mag or 300 Win mag,
right?
Those are all large rifle.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yep. Okay, where do you want to go next?
Bullets.
Bullets. Yeah. Okay.
So that's usually a big common thing that
right.
They have the same thing like in the case. There's like, you know, stuff that's okay, and then there's stuff that's like a lot better.
I'm gonna open this.
Yeah.
Steve Williams, if you're watching, you can have it.
You can have it.
I'm gonna open this.
I would say the least favorite bullet, especially for me, and I'm sure JP also, would be cast bullets. Like just regular cast lead. It's kind of like what you see in what was the Patriot, where they're like casting their own like shot stuff, where they just like pour molted lead into a cast and it comes out as a bullet.
Yep.
They put it through a sizer just to make sure it's the right size, but that's all it is. So whenever you light that and you propel it down the end of the barrel, it has a lot of smoke, like tons of smoke, because it's just burning off all that lead, right? So it's very dangerous typically if you start breathing in all that. So after that, what they've moved on to is like polymer coated lead, right? So it's very similar, just doesn't have as much smoke as regular lead, but it still does have a pretty good amount of smoke. I would think.
Yes. Versus a jacketed.
Versus jacketed, yeah, 100%. These also, if you start moving them so fast, they're not very accurate. They start tumbling and start like moving different ways just because there's not a jacketed bullet,
right?
You know.
Well, and I think part of it is that once you start getting it, once it starts to go higher velocities, and based on your pistol, you know, it could shear off all of that coating, and it doesn't do it in a controlled manner, right? So one bullet could shear off a bunch of it. One bullet, it may not shear off at all, and so it's just physics at that point. If you're not shooting the same thing out of the same barrel all the time, then it's going to fly different, right? So, you know, because it's going to have a different mass coming out of the barrel, it's going to fly different, it's going to have different turbulent pattern, whatever. Like you can get into it,
and the bullet like spins, right? So like once it's coming out the end of the barrel, it's starting to turn. So if you put more weight on one side of the bullet, it's just going to start going all over the place.
Yeah,
right.
It's just going to go turn left or turn right or whatever.
It's like whenever they say they start adding weights to the end of a helicopter thing, and like it all knocks it off balance and can like demolish everything. Same thing, or put like a stamp on a CD-ROM and like start spinning it. Yeah, like it's going to start like moving around and it'll probably like shatter over time.
Well, it's even like going to get your tires balanced. Like there's a reason why you do that, right? Because you don't want them to spin in an uncontrolled way.
Yeah. So I think that's what a lot of the inaccuracy of lead and polymer coated lead comes from.
Yeah. They have come a long way for sure, because now Federal has that Syntec.
Yeah.
And at low velocities, I think that they're okay.
Yeah, they're okay. Yeah. Like anything I'd say under like 1,000 feet per second, like you're pretty good.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And I shot, and for reference, the most popular video on my channel, not that anybody cares, it's not like whatever. Anyway, the point is, the most popular one was that 9 major video that I did shooting coated lead out of my open gun at open pressures, or at open speeds. So, we're talking about 1,450 feet per second plus, and it was like a shotgun.
Yeah,
they wouldn't go anywhere, And then my control, I had 2 different controls. I had Montana Gold, which is a jacketed in brass. And then I had Precision Delta, which we use in our ammo, just a copper jacket. And both of them, they were just bullet on bullet, you know. And I won't get into the names of the Molly ones that I tested, but I tested most of the mainstream ones. And out of an open gun, pushing it at those pressures, even within, I think it was like 5 or 7 yards. Dude, it was terrible. Yeah, it was so bad.
And every bullet like has their own speed that they're good with. Like, I find like we've done some testing with 9mm, right? Like anything under like 1,000 feet per second for 9mm is not as accurate as like 1,100 feet per second or 1,000 for it. Like it really starts grouping a whole lot better whenever you start pushing a little bit faster.
Right.
But after polymer coated lead would be like plated. Yeah, I was trying to think of the word. So like berries.
Yes.
I think it has a plated bullet.
Extreme. I don't know if they still make bullets, but Extreme used to do plated.
So that'd probably be the next best thing after that. And plated is like it has copper on it, but it's like very thin copper. Right. Don't they like wash it in copper or something?
Yeah. So there's a kind of, I think it's like a electrophoresis process. So what they do is they take the lead and they'll put it into a bath, and then they'll have a copper plate. And, through the magic of chemistry, they put, an electrode on one and an electrode on another, and then the copper just gravitates and binds to the lead, And, the good part about that is that it covers the lead a little bit more that coating is a little bit thicker than the moly coat that you get on a.
You don't get smoke. I know that.
You don't get smoke.
You don't get the smoke. It's just like shooting a jacketed bullet on the smoke part. The downside I found was that it's not as accurate,
correct,
as a jacketed bullet because of the same ways, like not as thick. It doesn't have the same amount of coating all the way around,
right?
And then also on smaller guns like shorter barrels, they'll end up shredding the little coating off of
Same.
it. Yeah. So like
Higher velocities too. Yeah, because you
higher
can't shoot. There are very few open guns that will operate with plated bullets.
Yeah, you'll shred the plate off of it. Same. Those little Smith and Wesson shields are famous for that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like people will bring them in and they'll shoot like Blazer ammo is one of them that uses that type of bullet.
Yeah.
And they'll shoot it like 5 or 7 yards, and you'll see the bullets like. You see the bullet impact, and then all of a sudden you see just like this tear of paper about 3 or 4 inches off the side, and that's the plating.
That's the plating.
The plating just like shears off and just like hits the target.
Wow!
Because I think the shields, the Smith & Wesson shields, their barrel twist rate is like so much faster, and I think it's just shearing it off.
Got it.
Especially in smaller barrels. Probably this gun, this Sig Spectre Comp, it only has like a 3-inch barrel. It's probably the same thing.
Yeah, for sure.
It just shreds it off. After that would probably be jacketed bullets, right? That's what my favorite is. That's what your favorite is.
Sure is.
Like that's what we use on everything, on self-defense ammo, even on practice ammo. I still highly recommend jacketed bullets. It's not that much more expensive, I don't think.
Right. Yeah. Correct. Well, and I think if it is, then you're kind of like, you need to look around, because there are places who will create practice ammo for you that uses jacketed, and it's not that much more expensive.
Yep. Like we use Precision Delta. If you're going to load ammo, like I do highly recommend them. I think they're the best jacketed bullets for the price by far.
For sure.
Like they're super reasonable in price.
Yeah. And they're very good. We've used Montana Gold in the past for product, not just for us, but for product that we sell. The thing about Montana Gold is it's jacketed and brass. It's just harder to get.
Yeah, it's harder to get, and then it also I find that it recalls a little bit more because the brass is a little bit like harder. Than copper.
Yes. And so the way you make that is that you take the lead, right? You have a lead projectile, and then you essentially wrap it in copper.
Thick copper.
Correct. Yeah, and you imagine that it's really. It's almost like taking tinfoil and wrapping something, right? That's, they push it through a copper piece and it wraps around. So that's how it's made. Yeah.
And also, like, I think they're more consistent. Like, whenever we go to matches, they pull a bullet and then they'll weigh the bullet, right? So, like, whenever we give ammo, it's always at like 124.0, 124.2. Like, it's like to the hundredth. It's never off by more than 1 grain, for sure. Like, ever. I've never had one do that. Now, the polymer coated stuff, I see that all the time.
Sure.
Right? Like you'll see 125, 126, or 123, like it's a huge difference. It's not as much as like a 100th of a grain.
Sure, certainly. Yeah.
So,
and I think, the other thing is it's not so messy.
Yeah.
The one thing that you get into, and it's kind of like an undeniable fact if you're shooting stuff like, lead, coated lead, or even, what do you call it? The plated stuff in your gun, it is going to be more dirty than a jacketed bullet. Now, and I say that, and saying plated is about the same as jacketed. It's only when you start to shred the coating off that it starts to get real messy. But the lead for sure. If you're going to shoot lead, shoot coated lead.
Yeah.
Right? Don't shoot straight lead.
Because you got to clean the barrels. Like, remember the old Glocks? They couldn't, people were blowing up guns and stuff because they were shooting regular lead and not cleaning out the barrels.
Correct.
And they had a polygonal rifling, so it would actually just like smoothbore it pretty much.
Yeah. So, yes, don't shoot straight lead. And a lot of folks, I know people, who cast their own bullets. Just like we were saying, modern day, they cast their own bullets. No problem. Okay, that's fine. You do what you do, but at the same time, if you're going to cast your own bullets, put polymer on them. You can get the polymer in. You can buy that stuff. So it's not uncommon to be able to to powder coat your own.
At some point, you're like, how much money are you saving, and how much is your time worth?
Exactly. Yes. Like, there's a reason why we don't.
That's right. There's a reason why we don't. Precision Delta compared to like polymer coated bullets, like if you're buying them. I think they're like $10 1,000 difference. Yeah. Right. Like that's not that much. Right. Like, so if you're shooting 100,000 a year, it's $1,000 or,
No. And I think I also think it's, part of it is like what you want to shoot and what you want to do. I mean, if you really like reloading and you like doing that and you like messing with it, I know a lot of guys gravitate towards the polymer that are very like avid reloaders, and they're like just as accurate and this and that. And it's like, yes, you're right. But at certain speeds, because they're playing with, they're playing with 0.2, 0.3 grains of powder charge, and they're like, trying to figure out what it is, and they're trying to work out a load for them. It's like, okay, well, I could see if you're just tinkering, then maybe you use the coated lead, because then it's like, okay, well, I'm going to see how it reacts. But when they put the jacketed on top, it's like, well, it's going to react different than all of those also, right?
Yeah.
The other thing to keep in mind too is that I lost it. I don't know. It'll come back to me. Oh, I know what it was. And people say it's just as accurate and holds up and everything. It's like, yes, but if you look at rifle rounds, and you just compare, there are no rifle rounds that are using anything except for jacketed.
Yeah, all jacketed.
It's all jacketed, and there's a reason, because it holds up to higher pressure and it's accurate.
Yep.
So
there's some that like try to do plated at one time, some 300 blackouts and stuff, but then they had such a bad rap for doing it that they like nobody ever uses it anymore.
Right.
And that's going super slow, right? Like 300 blackouts, subsonic.
That's almost pistol.
It's pistol velocities, right? It's like 900 feet per second. So and they still wasn't stabilizing as well as a jacketed bullet,
right? With like a 10-inch barrel.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
Yep. So
that's the difference between coated and jacketed. The shapes, there are different bullet shapes that are, so you have the round nose there that's coated lead, and then we have the jacketed hollow point, which a lot of folks use for defensive ammo. There are the flat tip, the conical flat tip bullets or whatever. There's where essentially it's rounded, except they cut the tops off, so it's flat on the top.
It kind of looks like a hollow point, but it's solid.
It's filled in.
Yep.
Yeah. They're jacketed round nose. There's, all kinds of stuff. And then when you get into rifle, it's even more so.
Yeah, there's like bolt tail hollow points to where it flies straighter.
Right.
I'd say for the handgun ammo, like hollow points are going to be more accurate. You would think it would be the opposite, right? Since you have a hollow cavity in it. It's like, well, how is that more accurate than like a point? Right. But Aubrey had actually explained it to me one time on fighter jets. Yeah, so like fighter jets have a cone on the inside, and what it does is as you start pushing the air to it, there's a outward force of air that comes back. So that is actually a perfect point. The outward force of air.
Okay.
So you can't get a better point than air.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. So it flies actually straighter than an actual full metal jacket.
Of course, Aubrey would know the physics of that. Yeah.
Exactly. I was like, man, that is so cool, right?
Yeah.
Because you push air into that hole, and it applies outward pressure of air.
Right.
That comes to a perfect point.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, that makes sense.
That's why it's more accurate. And we also use it because it cuts prettier holes in paper.
It sure does. Yeah. In competition, it's the way to go. It's, it very nice holes. Yep. Very, very perfect nice holes. Yeah.
In rifle rounds, they use hollow points because it's more accurate. Like it's not because it expands. Like, so for handgun ammo, it does expand. So once it hits soft tissue or some type of liquid, it starts mushrooming out and starts expanding and cutting more tissue, creating more damage, delivering more energy, and that's what you want for handgun ammo.
Right.
For regular rifle rounds, it doesn't do that. Usually the hollow points like fragment because they're just moving so fast that it ends up starting to tumble. And once it starts to tumble, it's like spinning so fast it just explodes.
Right.
Right. So the reason why they put a hollow point in rifle ammo is because it flies more accurately.
Right. Right. So one quick side note here: not all pistol hollow points are expanding.
Right.
Okay. So if you are looking at some discount hollow point ammo, if you're a customer of Skill Builder, right, you will see our ammo, our Skill Builder ammo, which is our learning brand, the
like
high volume brand.
Yeah, practice ammo brand.
Exactly. It is hollow point. It is hollow point for a reason, and that reason is not self-defense.
Right. Yeah.
That reason is because it makes pretty holes.
Yep, and it's more accurate.
Yeah.
That's it.
Absolutely.
Now, Sentry Prime ammo is loaded with like gold dots or HSTs or things like that, and that is expanding hollow point.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is completely for defense purposes.
Yeah.
Yep. Very good. Okay, so I think we've gone all the way through, right? That's from primer to casing to bullet. For what it's worth, I don't know if I mentioned it before. So we talked earlier about that the powder charges in these cases are measured in grains. the bullet weights are also measured in grains. So that may get a little bit confusing to folks that think, oh, what's, a 115 grain versus a 124 grain. That is a 9 usually that's a 9 millimeter type, weight, right? 115 grain, 9 millimeter. It just means that it's the bullet itself, the projectile weighs 115 grains. Then you step up to a heavier one, 124 grains, and then 147, 150x, whatever, and so the higher the number clearly is the more, the heavier the bullet, the heavier the projectile.
Yeah. So whenever you go and purchase ammo, whenever you see on the box like 124 grain, that's not the grain of the powder that they're using. That's the grain of the bullet.
Correct. Yeah.
So
they will rarely, if ever, I don't think anybody I've seen ever shares their bullet, the powder weight.
Powder charge, no.
Yeah.
No, they'll share their feet per second.
Sure.
So that's usually what you see on the boxes, the amount that's in the box. Then you see another number that has grain weight on it. That's going to be for the weight of the bullet. Then you see a feet per second number.
Right.
So it's like 1,100 feet per second or 1,200 feet per second. That's the speed of the bullet that's traveling.
Right. So and that's at different distances too, right?
Yeah, and that's usually like it's kind of like smoke and mirrors, right? Because like they use test barrels, which are like 10 inches, so like it's not really what's going to be out of your gun,
right?
The ones that we advertise is out of a 5-inch barrel of a regular handgun. Sure. It's not out of a test barrel.
Yeah, we don't have a test barrel.
Yeah, we don't have a test barrel, and I want to see the actual number that's going to be out of a handgun.
Sure.
Not out of a test barrel that's going to be just for that one purpose, right?
Yeah.
Because they try to say like, oh, we're running at 1,200 feet per second. It's like, no, you're not really running at 1,200 feet per second. Yeah. Like you're doing it out of a test barrel, not out of a regular handgun.
Right. So yeah, and I mean you can check that really easy. You can take your defense ammo and go to a range that has a chronograph that you can use, and you can see it for yourself.
Yep.
I don't think the velocity itself is that important. I think if it's important if it's important to you and you want to know how fast it's going. Clearly, most self-defense rounds, because I haven't shot them all, but most self-defense rounds will protect you. You have no danger of
as long as it's moving fast enough to open up the bullet.
Correct.
That's it. That's all they need to do. And now with modern day technology, the bullets are opening up in a lot less velocities.
Right.
So I don't think you need like these plus P plus ammo anymore. Right. The reason why we started doing that is because as we started carrying guns, we started shrinking the barrels. So then the velocities start dropping.
Right.
And then the old type of bullet that would have to start expanding just out of moving the lead out of the way needed 1,200 feet per second to start moving. So they started upping the powder charges out of it in order to start carrying the same ammo. Well, now with bullet technology like gold dots or HST, stuff like that, they're like pre-cut. So like you can see like little lines in the bullet typically, and as soon as it starts hitting soft tissue, it starts expanding.
Sure.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's that's a thing to note, I guess, about the what am I trying to say? The takeaway, I think, for looking at velocity is it is going to tell you, it's generally going to tell you how much kick it has.
Yeah.
If you look at it, it's
usually.
Like, you pick up a case of, I don't know, what do they, you remember the old one, Federal Hydroshock?
Yeah.
And you pick up some Federal Hydroshock and you look at, the 150, or let's say you're shooting 45, because I used to carry a 45 and it used Hydroshocks in there. And, you see a 45 coming out at like 1,200 feet per second, like, geez, this is going to kick my face in.
Yeah.
Versus, because if you compare it, the way you compare it is you look at practice ammo.
Yeah.
And that practice ammo for the same 45 is coming out at like 800 feet per second.
On the same grain weight.
On the same grain weight. Yeah. Yes.
So that's another thing. Like if you get 115 grain weight on 9mm practice ammo, which is the most common, you're going to get like 1,100 to 1,200 feet per second. Right. And then if you go to a 124 grain that's moving the same speed, it's going to have more recoil because it's a heavier bullet. It should be traveling slower.
Correct.
Right. So like if you're moving our hollow points at 1150 and it's the same speed as a 115 grain, then it's going to be a hot round. Right. And you want that for self-defense ammo. But on a regular 124, it might only go like 1050 or right at 1100.
For sure.
Not 1150.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and hey, I'm going to geek out a little bit. You think about this, from I guess a scientific perspective, in that there's a formula, and I won't get into it because that's not important, but the lighter the bullet, the faster you have to accelerate it, or the faster it has to go to hit with the same amount of power. right?
Same energy.
The same energy. So if you have start 115 grain bullet and you shoot it at 1,000 feet per second, right? It's going to have a certain energy. Doesn't matter what the energy is, but it's going to have a certain energy. To get the same amount of energy, since you have a bigger mass with the 124 grain, it has to go. You can go slower, right? Actually, it necessarily has to go slower to get the same energy.
You get the same. Yeah.
So if you're shooting the same velocity, then it much more energy.
Much more energy.
Which then translates to your hand.
Yep.
Like you have to hold that thing. Yep. So yeah. And that's what you'll see in the practice ammo for sure. You'll start to see that the velocities of 115 versus 124 versus 147, they start to go down.
Right.
Right. Because same energy, but the equation is that you need less speed to get to that same energy.
Right.
Yeah. So I think before I start to dig into equations more, let me come back out. Is there anything else you think we want to cover with bullets? So. Yeah, I think it's they're fairly simple once you dig into it and you hear people talk about the different components that go into these things. But it also, when we started, it was a little bit confusing.
It's rocket science.
Yeah,
it is. It literally
on a small
is rocket
scale.
Science,
Yeah, on a small scale.
So it can get confusing, and a lot of times when people come in and they see different stuff on boxes, like they don't know what that means,
Sure.
And they kind of get overwhelmed. So once you break it down and know what the different components is and know what those numbers mean, it's like, okay, I can figure this out, right? I can figure it out myself, and that's what I wanted to try to do on this podcast was let you go to the store and like look at velocities and things and like look at ammo and be like, yeah, that does fit in my gun, and that I can shoot that out of my gun.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so here's a good thing to end on. Then what does it matter? You're the consumer. You're going in. You don't care about any of this stuff, right?
Yeah.
You see 115 grain and 147 grain, right? What does that mean to like the normal person?
So like if just for practice ammo, I would say get the cheaper one if you don't care about anything.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to have like faster shots and you want to get back on target quicker, then you probably go with a heavier grain weight because it's going to recoil less. Right. So you want to shoot faster and get back on target. You want less recall.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's exactly right. It's going to, the lighter grain weight on factory ammo is going to be snappier, right? Yep. You're going to feel it more, but it's cheaper.
Yep.
Right.
Well, and the reason why it's cheaper is because you're using less lead in order to make the product. So it's just like material cost of that.
The lead. So for what it's worth, yes, the lead is the most expensive part of this whole equation.
Yep.
Right.
Exactly.
So, but yeah, so if less lead, less cost.
Yep.
For sure. Now it's going to feel snappier as you go up in bullet weight. It's going to feel less snappy. But I'll put out the caveat there. If you don't shoot a lot, you will not know the difference.
You're not going to know the difference.
Thousands of rounds.
Yeah.
For you to feel the difference, it's really...
Or shooting them back to back.
Correct.
Like you shoot it back to back and you're like, okay, now I can kind of see.
Maybe, but I also think... Because I remember back in a time when I was testing them out and I was still... green. It's like I may have fired 300 rounds that whole year, and then I have two boxes right beside each other, 50 of one and 50 of the other. There's no way.
Couldn't tell.
No, I couldn't. I wasn't that attuned to it all. You know.
Yep.
But it's when you're a higher volume shooter, when you're shooting thousands of rounds, and then you switch, then you feel it.
Yep.
Yep. So
and for self-defense ammo, the higher the grain weight, typically the more that it penetrates because like the more mass it has behind it, and it's going to travel deeper. Yeah.
And generally, I think the latest in self-defense ammos, you want the heavier. Yeah. You want the heavier.
Most
stuff.
common is like for 9mm 124 because that's what the FBI uses. So like everybody else falls in line. Right.
Yeah.
And other grain weights like in 40 caliber, I think like 180s is like the most common.
Yeah.
For like 45 is 230. Is typically the most common one. So go with the most common, and that's what the sights are typically zeroed for. That's what 9mm. The iron sights are zeroed for 124 grain bullets.
Yep.
Like NATO. That's it.
For sure.
So that's what I would go with for self-defense stuff.
Yeah. And I self-defense for sure. I think, practice ammo, just, you're right. Whatever you can get your hands on.
Yep.
I mean, it's more important to practice than to have that you practice. Oh, I only practice 124 or 147 grain. That doesn't matter.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, by the time you are able to feel the difference, you won't need this podcast.
Right.
This particular show is not going to be important to you.
Yeah. I would look for like jacketed ammo over grain weight.
I think so. Yeah.
Jacketed ammo is going to be more accurate, so I'd much rather that than lighter recoil. Like you want most accuracy and doesn't have to start fouling up the gun and messing up the gun.
Yeah.
And you know that, hey, I'm on because the ammo's on.
Absolutely.
If you're off, then it's because of you. It's not because the ammo is flying a different way.
Yeah. So do you want to, and I have an answer in my head for this question. When you're practicing, do you want to match up grain weight for grain weight? Or are you looking more for velocity versus velocity when you're practicing? Like, because a lot of folks will say, well, I want to practice the same grain weight that I carry. Yeah.
Yeah, like I like to practice same grain weight if you zero the gun at something,
Right.
but sometimes it's not always feasible for people.
Correct.
Like if it's in the same like price point ballpark area, then like go with it. But if it's like a drastic difference, I'd say no. Like for rifle stuff, I usually carry like a 75 grain in my rifle, and then I'll try to practice with that, like some cheaper 75 grain stuff. Right. But like if I'm shooting machine gun, I'm not shooting 75 grain. I'm shooting 55 grain, like the cheapest stuff possible, just to put it down range, right? Yeah. So that's kind of like same thing on handguns. If you're carrying 124s, if the price point of 124s and 115 practice ammo is within $5 or $10 for 1,000, I'd say like get it, you know. But if it's like, oh, it's $50 more for the 1,000, I'd say just like get the 115s, you know,
for sure,
and then practice with that.
Yeah, for sure. The one thing I'll do is I'll take the cheap practice ammo, I'll practice up with it, right, and get to where I feel comfortable with it. Then because a lot of times, you know, the defense ammo, it comes in a box of 20.
Yeah,
you know,
very expensive.
Exactly. Yeah, and so I'll load up a mag, you know, a full mag for your carry gun is going to be anywhere between 10 and 15 rounds, 16 rounds, whatever. So load that up and you'll have a few left over, right? So then at the end, it's like, okay, I've practiced, boom. Okay, now let me feel what this gun's like with and end with that leftover defense ammo. So you've tested it, you know what it feels like. It's zeroed. You can test the zero, you know, and then I think you'll be good to go.
Yep. Yeah, that's a good thing. Like make sure you zero in the gun for the carry ammo that you choose.
Yes.
Like don't zero it for the full metal jackets that you shoot in practice.
Correct.
Zero the gun for the ammo that you really need at that time.
Yeah. Yeah. So, all right. I think we can leave them with that.
Cool.
Thanks, man.